With the Pittsburgh Penguins continuing to slide, an insider links them to an Eastern Conference team with the possibility of a blockbuster trade. And a reporter goes into two key players the Penguins might be interested in. We're going to break all this down and more later on this episode. Before we start, I just want to give a huge shout out to everyone that's subscribed. We're trying to make it to 6,500 subscribers, so if you haven't subscribed yet, it's completely free and we can keep you up to date on everything to do around the NHL. Now with this, Darius, let's just hop into the fact, what's your initial thoughts on the Pittsburgh Penguins team and Kyle Dubas just going out and wanting to make moves? We're seeing that Dubas is going, and this is per Darren Dreger, going and scouting the Montreal Canadiens heavily. So overall, just looking at this, what's your initial thoughts on this?
I'm not shocked. I'm really not shocked. I think the Pittsburgh Penguins and Kyle Dubas are smarter than they're kind of letting on so far this season. I think he knows that the writing is on the wall and this team is not good enough. Whether, the top guys there and the guys who have the no movement clause like it or not, right? They probably think that they can still be competitive, but we all know, Mark, that they aren't, right? It's really heading quickly in that direction. So I can't say I'm shocked, but I am a little bit shocked about the team that they're scouting and that Kyle Dubas is looking into the Montreal Canadiens because the Montreal Canadiens, I think they thought that they were going to be better this year. I think everyone thought that they would be at least challenging for a playoff spot, maybe in the mix there, maybe not make the playoffs, but take some steps forward. They haven't really done that. So I feel like there's some pieces there that Montreal wouldn't mind moving off if to kind of shake things up and see if they can accelerate their rebuild a little bit. So I think it's an interesting fit. So I am shocked about the team, but I think on the Pittsburgh side, something has to get done. They have to start getting creative.
And I mean, looking at Dubas, he probably wouldn't have got a trade done with Montreal when he was with Toronto. But looking at this Penguins roster, there's quite a few guys on a 1 year deal. There's a lot of 2 year deals, and you have a couple people locked up long term. But we also do get the report from Dan Kingsgree, sorry, I pronounced that completely wrong, from the Hockey News, and he said that Justin Barron and Kirby Dach are two people that might excite the Penguins. So looking at two of them with their current lineup, I do think two of these players can make an impact on the Penguins. They're both young. And Darius, we'll just hop into the first player being Justin Barron, a young 23-year-old right-handed defenseman. Could you see a fit with him on this Penguins team?
Definitely. I think the Pittsburgh Penguins need to start retooling the defense as well. They went out and got Erik Karlsson. That's been an absolute disaster in my eyes. I don't know why they went out and made that trade, and Kyle Dubas went out and made that trade for a defenseman like that at that point in his career with the team being where they are. Now, if you look at Barron from the Montreal Canadiens, I still think this is a very good young defenseman. He's not getting into too many games this season. He's only played a handful of games, getting healthy scratched and what have you on a team that's not great. So that signals to me maybe a change of scenery. Maybe they're not exactly excited about what he brings to the table. But again, still pretty young. That's a really nice looking cap hit as well if you're, a team trying to get younger and obviously add some new talent. So I think this is really enticing for a team, especially like Pittsburgh, who I think is going to try and retool on the fly. Like it might not be the big guys that are heading out of the door, right? We just saw them make a trade the other day for Phil Tomasino as well. They might be trying to retool on the fly, add some younger talent, and maybe some guys who aren't the top guys will be out the door, like Marcus Pettersson, for example. So I think that is a pretty good fit for the Pittsburgh Penguins and any team really. It looks like it might not work in Montreal all of a sudden because their defense core, they're trying a bunch of different things and it doesn't seem like it's working necessarily. But Barron, I think he's still a pretty good young defenseman.
And I mean, getting a guy like this, he can kind of grow with the team. I mean, you have Chris Letang and Erik Karlsson as the two top-handed right defensemen. But if you're moving one of these guys out, Barron can come in, grow with this team. I'm not going to say this is going to make the team better, but with how the Penguins are playing, can it really make them worse? Getting a guy back like this, maybe they move on from a defenseman. Maybe they just acquire him to play the third pairing just to get some reps with this team. But it doesn't stop there, as we've seen in the report, the fact that there is another player, and that is Kirby Dach. And I'm just going to kind of throw it to you with how Kirby Dach would fit on this team, and what do you think it would cost for the Pittsburgh Penguins to get him?
Well, I'm just going to float it out there that we know that the Pittsburgh Penguins have stated, and Kyle Dubas specifically, that everyone is available except for, of course, Sidney Crosby. So I'm just going to float it out there and be like, you know what? If you can somehow convince maybe Evgeny Malkin to waive his no trade clause to go to the Pittsburgh Penguins and then maybe, accept a flip deal where he goes to a third team where something is kind of bounced around there because we know Kyle Dubas loves to get third teams involved to make trades work, which is, creative. I think you're going to have to get creative if you're the Pittsburgh Penguins here, that's for sure. But I think it's very interesting. Maybe Evgeny Malkin, maybe he spends some time in Montreal, right? I'm just going to float that out there. But In terms of Kirby Dach as a fit on the Pittsburgh Penguins, I think it could be a really good fit. I think this is a player we sometimes forget how young he is still, right? But it hasn't worked in the Montreal Canadiens system so far. We thought that he'd be a lot better. I thought that there were signs in Chicago that he was going to be a top player in the league. And again, he is still young. He still can find it, but he's showing that maybe he can't play center. And maybe it's that he should be playing third line center until he develops into a second line center or something like that, right? But he's shown so far that maybe he can't. Now he's playing on the wing. He's playing top line minutes on the wing for the Montreal Canadiens. He's getting the most offensive zone faceoffs, or, he's on pace to in his career this season, and he hasn't been able to turn it into success offensively so far. So I think that there is a world where he can maybe find that on the wing, maybe even at center, and start to develop as a center under the guidance of a guy like maybe Sidney Crosby, or even if the Penguins are able to hang on to Evgeny Malkin as well. I think that could be a good fit for him because, you know what, in Montreal, no disrespect, I think Nick Suzuki is a great player and a great captain, but if you can learn from somebody like Sidney Crosby, where, he's one of the best face-off guys in the league, that's another thing that Kirby Dach needs to work on. If he's going to be a center, he's not a great face-off guy. So I think it could be a very interesting fit.
And I mean, looking at Malkin going to, well, the possibility of him joining this team, I mean, we're looking at Malkin, a guy that's been with this team his entire career. But the biggest part with this, and we've seen from just kind of a fury of reports, is the fact that they want to take expiring contracts. They could attach sweeteners. The Montreal Canadiens could get Evgeny Malkin. Even if he doesn't want to play in Montreal, this could be a 3-team deal. They have Jake Allen and Jeff Petrie as their last 2 retained spots, both ending this year. So if you wanted to go out and move Malkin, if you wanted to move him onto a 3rd team, they could get a king's ransom for this type of contract. We're seeing Malkin come in, being a huge part of this Pittsburgh team, coming in at a decent cap hit. If you retain half, it's going to be 2 years, but you could get multiple picks, prospects from both the Pittsburgh Penguins and that 3rd team. But looking at this roster, do you think it's more going to be maybe a guy like Kevin Hayes that goes out in this deal? Or do you think there is actually a possibility that we see Evgeny Malkin wearing red?
Yeah, I think it would make sense for the Pittsburgh Penguins to trade any of their young players at this point. I think, as much as possible, try and get rid of or try to, shed the older guys and guys who have no movement clauses and that are taking, the rebuild's got to start, right? At some point, like it has to. I think it's going to be really hard to retool on the fly and be competitive if you're this team. And again, with the Montreal Canadiens, a guy like Evgeny Malkin, maybe, Chris Letang. For Letang, it would be nice to play at home. Maybe that could be enticing for him or closer to home. But, in terms of the competitiveness at the end of their career, maybe they want to win another Stanley Cup. Montreal is not a destination for that right now. So I'm not sure what comes out of the Pittsburgh Penguins system. I think they're in a real tough spot where Dubas is trying to retool on the fly for, I say for some reason, but obviously we know he's a little bit handcuffed. They're getting guys like Phil Tomasino and filling in these spots, but I feel like it might only be, the lower end guys that are being shipped out. And he's just trying to, shuffle the pool deck chairs on the cruise ship there. But we'll see. We'll see.
But what's everyone's thoughts on this? What's your thoughts on maybe a guy like Kirby Dach joining this Pittsburgh team? What do you think a trade would be involved to get this former top 5 pick to the Pittsburgh Penguins? Let us know down in the comments. While you're down there, leave a like, subscribe, share this with your friends. We're trying to hit 6,500, so if you want to join the Hat Trick community, make sure to go down and do that. But I've been your host, Mark, with my co-host, Darius, and take care.